Welcome to my talk here. How fan culture came to dominate politics. Somewhat provocatively titled. We'll see if I get to all of that. But I wanted to start with having you guys think, and thank you for an introduction that also got you doing this, of what are you a fan of? What do you come back to again and again? What media makes you you? I feel like in this day and age, we all have something. I think fandom is no longer just for a youth thing or for people in shut-ins and basements. As for me, well, I'm a big fan of the Pet Shop Boys, Star Trek, and Arsenal FC. As mentioned, I am also an assistant professor at Utrecht University. You can see my old profile photo. I need a new profile photo at Utrecht University. And my research specialty at Utrecht is fandom. And I'm particularly interested in how fandom has changed in recent years, in the past few decades, really, and particularly how things that were previously outside of fandom, outside of fan culture, now really have fans. For me, fandom is a major part of contemporary identity. It's how we determine who we are to ourselves, how we define ourselves to others, what we want to be. In a mediatized society, which I think is what we're in, how we engage with media and what we do with it becomes part of who we are. And this shapes not only identity, but how we relate to media texts of all kinds, including, politics, which increasingly looks a lot like fandom. But why is this so? How did fan culture come to, dominate, in some words, politics? How did we get here? And I'll explain as much as I can in 10 minutes, 8 minutes now. It's a bit of a rush, so if anyone is in my field here listening, I apologize for all the generalizations I'm about to do. Now, despite what my students think, fandom isn't new. It has a lot of quite old precedents, such as Roman chariot races, which had celebrity drivers and color-coordinated factions, very, very similar to today's sports culture. We start seeing its modern forms as soon as we start seeing mass media. Art and culture becomes spread out, accessible to bigger groups, so more people can experience it and keep up with it, especially as an industry gets built around exemplary texts and performers, such as the film industry, recorded music, and professional sports yet again. But what is fandom actually? Cornel Sandvoss describes fandom as the regular, emotionally involved consumption of a given narrative or text. Very academic way of putting it. And we see this as there becomes narratives or texts or objects to regularly consume and regularly come back to. Emotions are key to this. Emotionally, we connect to this work, the people who make it, what we see them do. This means something. It becomes part of us, part of how we identify to ourselves and others. So to my example, the Pet Shop Boys become a key to understanding who I am. What I feel gets reflected in this music. And often we look to make connections with others who also feel this way. So that brings us to, let's have a closer little look at the history of fandom. So fans, particularly in the sort of modern sense, have always organized. They've built clubs and infrastructure. You can kind of see some examples here for a Star Trek convention in 1972 and a fanzine from The Prisoner from 1980. So fans were resourceful and creative in how they came together and built on their favorite texts. But were limited by geography and resources. You could be a fan with others around you. You could go to conventions like this, but there were still limits. You have to be able to afford them. You have to have them around you somewhere. And because of the effort that it took, it was really considered to be kind of a weird hobby. Now, this started to change with the invention of the internet, which was first available mostly to scientists and researchers like myself, although, of course, that would also change. People who had access to this new communicative medium found that they could use it not only to share research, but to talk about all of the other things they were passionate about with like-minded people from all over. And so, the earliest non-scientific uses of the internet were fanish. And to be honest, kind of traditionally fanish, a little bit geeky. So news groups and mailing lists around Star Trek, around the Grateful Dead, these kind of things were some of the first things that people could do for fun online. And fans found this new medium perfect for their needs, to connect, to create and share their creativity. So we started seeing a lot more places to share fan fiction, videos, things that people were already doing, but now you could really share them. And especially as it became popular to do more than just chat, and more people got online. So fans made websites. It's a very classic website of a certain period of time. I don't know if any of you recognize or remember what these websites looked like. But there are ways to distribute information, connect with others, engage emotionally. And this kind of became the backbone of what we do, everyone does online. The internet's really based on fandom. What we think it's for is kind of based on these fan practices. You don't just watch a show. You discuss it. You think about theories about it. All the things that really used to be done mostly at fan conventions or other sort of little fan gatherings. And as more people started using the internet, so these are kind of a different stage of the internet, this became more prevalent, more visible to people who not only saw themselves already as fans, but kind of to everyone. And including a media industry that was starting to really fragment under this new attention economy, where suddenly audience had a lot more options. We didn't have just 3 channels anymore. We had dozens and needed to get an audience there. So focusing on a passionate and engaged audience became seen as a way to get this attention and the resources that came with it, both actual cash and labor, like marketing and advertising. Think of how you hear about new shows to watch. Oftentimes it comes from your friends. It comes from people who seem excited about it. So from a niche, grassroots sort of thing, considered to be the domain of weirdos with too much time on their hands or young people, fandom became encouraged. It started to mainstream, became a normalized way of engaging with media and culture and everything that can be considered part of it. I'm really fascinated by Bravo conventions, this personal thing I love. So after all, it's enjoyable and it's fun and it builds connections and community that we all want and encourages a certain kind of consumption that the media industry also wants. So engaging emotionally becomes a mainstream way of engaging with media, or at least the most visible way of engaging with media. So going back to all of these kind of things that many people do, discuss new episodes of shows every week, buy merchandise, etc. These are all really classic fan behaviors. These really used to be the domain of people who went to Star Trek conventions every few months. Now it's for everyone. And there's a lot more to be said for here, like I said, sneaking on time mostly, about what kind of fandom is encouraged and what kind of fandom isn't. But it is worth noting, as I go to the next part of the story, that there's been a change in the self-conception of fans, from engaged critics and creators to really devoted attack squads. So, to go to the next part of the story, at the same time, as all of this stuff about fandom is happening, politics has become increasingly mediatized. So it's a term that we use to describe when previously non-media things fall under the domain of the media. So they come to rely on the media for resources, for form. So you kind of have a 24-hour news channel, social media, all these kind of things. Politics these days is as much media as it is governance, and presented very much as media, with personalities, with narratives, things to connect with emotionally. And how do you engage with media in this day and age? How do you show like you care, that you're part of the community that also cares? Well, you act like a fan. Oh yeah, it's great when we're writing a presentation and then something comes online that's exactly what you need for the presentation. It's really outstanding. And so like I said, this works really well for politicians and parties who want to compete in the same attention economy that every other part of the media industry has to compete in. And particularly with how fandom is set up for today. You got people willing to put in work for you, to defend you, to like you. So politics becomes a fandom, a lot like any other. And this raises important questions. What does it mean to respond to Rob Yetton or Boris Johnson the way you respond to Harry Styles or Game of Thrones? Does this make politicians and politics seem unreal? Something to look at for entertainment rather than representatives with real power over your life. And sort of the explanation here, so we have an image from a Wattpad fan fiction of Jesse Klaver and Rob Yetton. I hope I pronounced those names somewhat correctly. Somebody made, somebody posted. There was a whole thing of it online about a year ago, as well as somebody talking about something with American Senator Kristen Sinema, talking about it in terms of new lore dropping about her. So it kind of becomes this entertainment. It becomes this sort of more unreal kind of fun thing. They might be a little tongue-in-cheek, obviously, but these are media characters. Another thing that could happen, a field where the only important thing is that your color wins over the rival. There's done some really good work right now that explaining, particularly a lot of right-wing movements, thinking about them in terms of fandom, in this kind of community, and this kind of emotional engagement, is a much better way to understand them than in traditional politics terms. This is about emotion. This is about engagement. This is about community. And I like to end on something a little bit positive. You can also see this as a way for get people to really engage with politics, to see it as something personal, a thing that connects you to others and the problems that we all face. which is something like some politicians really do try to harness this. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is, I think, a very good example of doing that, but still kind of operating in this somewhat fannish way. So these are the questions that we're kind of working on in my field, sort of the questions that we have when we talk about fandom and politics and things that we're thinking about. Mostly because the situation that led to it isn't really going away. Politics is media, and that's what we have. Thank you for listening.